We're warming up.
All right, welcome to People
We're
vs.
warming up.
Algorithms, a show about technology, culture, media, a lot of other things, connecting the dots. I'm joined by Troy Young. Where is Alex?
Mexico.
We need this to be a sponsored segment. Where is Alex? Is he have jury duty? What is his excuse?
Alex sent in a monologue that I rejected.
Why? I think we need to insert it. I didn't listen to it yet.
No, we're not.
But we need to
insert
insert.
This is not a show about Alex's musings. This is.
Okay, well,
I love Alex, and I think he has a lot to contribute. But
Alex, I'm thankful for you. I appreciate you, as a
I'm
lot of
very
people
grateful
in
to
Miami
Alex.
like to say. Before we get into it, I want to do a little bit of feedback. I got some feedback. I didn't actually get to share this with you.
You're springing this on me right now?
Yeah, basically. I'm not going to say this person's name because I didn't ask. I really appreciate their mind is opening up a bit to the waves of people who are critical thinkers, have distrust in corporate media propaganda, and don't believe what TV tells us or what big pharma allows them to say. Rogan facilitates the most interesting conversations on very niche topics: regenerative farming, proactive health, well-being. Historians, decorated military vets, award-winning doctors, etc. Listen to him with an open mind and you'll become a regular listener. There's nobody out there like him. The corporate media hates him because he facilitates 3-hour conversations that goes deep versus their antiquated clickbait headlines and edited sound bites. Also, there was a PS to give Scott Galloway credit for coining the manosphere catchphrase. I didn't actually know that, so apologies to Scott Galloway.
Good one, Scott.
I think that is actually well put in some ways. And I think that is part of, there's a lot of circular firing squad going on in Democratic circles right now. I think something similar is happening. We're going to talk about it a little bit in the news media about how to, reclaim trust. But I think the real question is how you reclaim relevance in some ways. And there is something to be said about these long conversations that are not neatly packaged, if you will. It's something that I see.
He had Mark Andreessen drop by this week. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I haven't dug in for the full 3 hours. I have to admit, but it is interesting to me because I try to take this stuff, maybe not literally, but at least seriously. In that there are a lot of prominent people out there who are saying things like what Mark Andreessen says, and I don't know what's in his heart. Let me just assume good intentions. And basically, he said there's two types of cocktail parties in Silicon Valley. The one where people believe the New York Times, despite the fact that they said something different like 6 months ago, and the kinds that he's at now, where it's the critical thinkers, in quotes, or TM, however you want to go about it. And this was kind of highlighted this week. I don't know if you've read any of Elon's 4 million tweets this week, but the one that really resonated with me was when he's gone back to this thing that you are the media. And he's declared this several times. And he actually brought in Jim Vandehei, the Axios CEO, I think via Joe and Mika and MSNBC. But Jim had spoken at the National Press Club and had done a little bit of a cri de coeur for journalism and the news industry and called bullshit.
It was powerful, right? It worked.
It was.
It was good.
Jim, it was a clarion call. And, of course, then it got pulled in with Elon Musk into this you are the media. And I don't know. I always just find all of these things just positioning. It's marketing, it's branding. Because what capital J journalism does is completely different than what people are doing on X or whatever. I don't think it's an either or situation. It's just, they're not substitution products. And we see this all the time. I mean, the podcasters are downstream of, journalism, right? And they pick and choose which of the facts that are unearthed by journalists they're going to use to connect the dots to further their worldview. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious that there is actually some symbiosis there, right? I think the challenge for the news industry as a business is they're being compressed, where value overwhelming amount of the value is on the interface level, like we say. You control the distribution, you control the monetization, you're going to do real well. But then there's a further compression downstream of the mining of the facts, which is putting them into context and to connecting the dots. Now, when the news media does do that, they're being told that this is how you erode trust. If you read an analysis piece by Peter Baker, personally, I want to know, what is this guy's politics? Because he's clearly pushing this in some direction, right? But the problem is the monetization, it's way better to be downstream of mining facts. It's way better to be taking those facts and refining them into some kind of narrative or to push some kind of worldview.
Well, there was a time when that mode of work or creation was really monetizable, and that was cable news. The problem is that, reporting outside of the New York Times and a few other sort of subscription-driven outlets is not a game that pays the bills.
It's uneconomic activity.
Yeah.
Because the way I look at it, it's like, so you said the New York Times is pretty much one of the few. Otherwise, you need to be in some kind of business news sector. The Wall Street Journal can pull this off, right? By the way, they've been able to pull off having a very strident editorial page operation.
I mean, it's more than the Journal, right? Like it's the New Yorker, it's little guys that do reporting like 404. There's still a tier of media that does the hard work and has a mechanism to pay for it.
Right, but like when you mentioned this, that they are direct reader supported, if not subscriptions, basically. So
it's got to
you have to be able to.
It's got to be reader supported,
right?
Yeah.
And now the most effective place to get subscriptions, however, is to align with a worldview and in news, right, and to cater to that. Look at what happened to the Washington Post with Bezos, right? Did you know what's the ironic thing is the crazy ads on X got a little less crazy because like the Washington Post is like they're doing a lot of like heavy growth right now because they gotta bring in the people that Bezos.
You're seeing away. Washington Post ads on X.
Yeah, they're trying to get
acquisition ads.
Acquisition ads. They're basically not saying like democracy dies in darkness. The new one is like how Trump is going to impact the world, which is obviously a much more middle of the road positioning. I don't know if that's just, happenstance.
No, they're competing with Ray Dalio.
Yeah, well, that's the information space, right? So, but I think that is the challenge is like, if you're going to be, elites love to claim that what is needed is unbiased news. Now, the unbiased stuff, I don't know, like the AP just had big layoffs. Like, I don't know where exactly this nirvana is. And it's usually elite people that want these kind of things. And in a populist era, I don't see how it is necessarily a good business decision to try to play it down the middle. You can do it for all kinds of reasons, society, impact, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for most news publications, it would seem to me that the market is pushing you to pick a side and to be tribal.
But aren't you making a broader point, which is news gathering doesn't pay?
Well, yeah, it doesn't pay unless you're going to align it with a worldview and a point of view and a tribal identity. I think it can pay then. Or if you're in a really niche area, like we always talk about, particularly if you can align with powerful interests and help people ideally, make more money, then you're fine.
But Brian, let's try to break down what this idea of you are the media, we are the media. What is that? What is the mechanic that speaks to? Is it that layers of conversation and kind of, I guess, some type of informal fact gathering through the commons will get filtered through mechanisms like an algorithm, like notes on an X post, like a well-articulated view or some type of persuasive view on YouTube that breaks through, that this kind of almost like water getting filtered through a stream, will reveal the truth, and that we can't rely on the hard work of an individual making phone calls, finding sources, filtering those through, fact checking structures and a media brand, that's no longer the way to get to truth or consensus. What are the two sides of this, right? Like Jim is saying, being a journalist is hard work. Someone has to kind of do this work. It's many times it's thankless. It's not someone popping off on Twitter. This is a vocation. This is a profession. This is something you dedicate your life to. This is really important. And
Sure.
we need a structure, an organized approach to gathering this kind of information and holding people accountable. And that's not going to come from the people, the commons, the unauthenticated points of view of someone writing a 200 character tweet. What's the argument on the Elon side?
Well, I think the argument on the Elon side is that if you gather enough of this material from what they're rechristening, we're back to citizen journalism, right? That you will have a bit of a wisdom of the crowds. It is the same as polling is very important, et cetera. It's a profession, but maybe Polymarket and maybe Kalshi and prediction markets where people are just gambling are actually more accurate. Because I think one of the challenges to me, and that's why I think it's starting to become obvious, is the product problem in journalism. And I think a lot of that stems from like when the criticism I hear that, oh, you said one thing 6 months ago and then you said something different like today. It's like, well, yeah, of course. The idea that I think one of the embedded flaws of journalism, I'm sure you've seen it yourself. Like I haven't had stuff written about me really, but like I'm sure people have had stuff written about them, and these powerful people say, well, this isn't the full story, or this is not I don't believe this at all. And so then they would say, well, that's not true about a lot of different things. I get that, because there is this idea of packaging up the quote unquote the truth that is, in my view, kind of arrogant, because like there's a lot that you do not know. You know what you know on deadline is what they say. I mean, anyone who's been in this profession at any level knows you publish stories, and like maybe it's just me. I'm like, in the heart of hearts, I'm like, God, like I think this is what happened, but like really? Like, I mean, there's so many different factors that can change. And we saw this with a lot of the examples that Elon and others are talking about with the Wuhan lab, and all the COVID stuff has come back to be debated. Is like, it is really messy trying to understand as a journalist what the hell is going on. Okay. But I think the profession itself makes you present a package as if it's all neat and like, yes, this is exactly, because it's like the voice of God kind of thing, where at the very least, and I think what we see, what this correspondent talked about with Joe Rogan, is trying to figure things out. And I think that is the thing that is resonating, in that there's a little bit of humility to me in that. I mean, Joe Rogan says a lot of stuff I don't agree with at all, right? But at least it is like said in a conversational way. And I think that is the part that is a struggle on the product side for journalism. Mm-hmm. The neat little package of like, hey, this is everything, that, but instead of like, okay, we're trying to figure this out. And I think that's the interesting part of what is to me
Trump
like an
challenged it in ways that were shocking by throwing up a wall of his own bullshit against what what was perceived to be one view of the world that came from media that was hostile to him and his views. Yeah. We saw it this week where the Wall Street Journal came out and said that Tesla was an irresponsible environmental company, that they were dumping, toxins into the water, and, this company that is meant to be, sort of singularly responsible for a really important kind of environmental movement in electric cars was really hypocritical. At which point Elon freaked out and said, this is why media is cannot be trusted. This is bullshit. And this is really counter to the spirit of the company and the people that are working inside of it. And so that process to me seems healthy, right? It's like you need both. I think that when someone reads that Tesla is a polluter in the Wall Street Journal, and that is taken as, just a singular truth, that, that's what people react negatively to. So your point is that it's impossible for media to get, their arms around what the real story is, and that does need to kind of go through a filtration system. But for a long time, it didn't. Is that what you're saying?
I just think because of this information space and because there's so much more information out there, I don't think that most of the news media is quote unquote biased in the way that people are claiming. It's just things get left out. Things you assign the story, and different stories. I mean, you have had things written about you. Did you find everything to be completely 100% your view of the truth?
No, I think that it started with what is the idea of a good story here. It happened in a really kind of intense, time and environment, or, in like 2020, and that there was, a good story to be written. So you go out and you try to find the things that validate that story, right? Like in my case, in a game of very difficult, highly political kind of corporate media environment where intense changes need to happen to a company, where lots of people have to leave and lots of kind of established practices need to be challenged and dismantled, where a union movement is fighting to kind of change how, a group of people's position in the kind of ongoing negotiation that is an organization, that you make enemies, right? By necessity. And you make enemies because of how you approach problems, for better or worse. You make enemies because, you fuck up, you say things that are stupid, or but like, with in contextualized or not terrible. And then you can write any story you want around that, right? You can find the people that will make you feel like someone is doing the work of important transformation work, reflected in the economics of the business, or you can find a story, a thread through it all, that this person is, whatever, evil, toxic, whatever, however you want to frame it. And so, yeah, there's definitely two sides to it. And then what was always on my mind is,
but wait. Journalism is supposed to be presenting the all sides, right? But
that's ridiculous.
What do you mean?
Well, in this case, I just don't think that that's what happened. I think the all sides.
So I guess what I'm
saying, and remember, in that environment, the people on the other side were afraid to say anything, lest they be caught up in the whole controversy, right? The people that had good things to say aren't going to say, no, that's not how this went, because it was a time of tremendous fear, right? Like there was no, it didn't pay to stand up for something. It absolutely didn't. So as the person in that narrative, me, you can either challenge it and do what, say Trump does, which is like, this is bullshit. This is fake news. This is what really happened. You throw something out. No, you go to war. But when you go to war, there's other people that are involved. And so that means that the company that you really respect and like becomes central to that whole, narrative, that a lot of, like, it can get complicated legally. There's a lot of complexity in going to war. And by the way, you have to be the kind of person that wants to go to war. I don't want to go to war with people in a situation like that. Right. It's just not my makeup. And so, yeah, but this isn't about me, dude.
But does that, no, I know that. But my only point was, I can see how that would impact how someone sees the journalistic process. And I think someone like, let's just assume that Elon Musk is sincere in his belief that, the journalistic industrial complex is corrupt in some way, shape, or form. Like, and Mark Andreessen the same way. Like, how did they arrive at that? And I think it comes down to, I used to think this about, I'll say it, Fast Company. Like, whenever they would write about something that I knew about, I was like, this is so thin and really not accurate. And then I started to be like, wait a second, all the other stuff is probably this way. So I might want to discount the other things. This was a different generation. But I can see how someone who has had so many different articles written about them, that they have found the exact same way that you found, the stories in 2020, that they would just conclude that everything is bullshit. If they have the lived experience that someone is writing about, because again, I have not had the experience of someone writing about me in that way, but I imagine if I had that experience and it was completely opposite from the way I perceive both myself and the world, okay, that I would be like, and this happened to repeat, I would say, well, the rest of this stuff is bullshit. Why wouldn't, if it's just bullshit when it's about me, wouldn't it stand to reason? I think in this kind of like engineering brain particularly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that people get caught in this because it's personal at some point, or it's challenging, their own, place in the world, or in the case of like Mark Andreessen, maybe, the success of his investments, right? Like,
but I think this is more than working the reps.
Like, I'll tell you that there was a, seemingly intelligent, strident young journalist who had every opportunity in 2020, someone who I presented a lot of facts to and gave him a lot of people that he should have a discussion with. Now, admittedly, like I said, in 2020, it was really hard to get people to go on the record about anything era. Because it was like, you are going to get caught in this in a way that you don't want to be caught in this. And so be careful what you say about anything, even if it's what you really believe. And there are a lot of people that I would consider, to be supporters and friends and stuff that were, I understood why it was difficult. But the conversations I had with this person and what this person told to put in a tidy little narrative were completely different. And that was this kind of journalist prerogative, where the story got, like, a clean story got in the way of any pursuit of nuance in both sides and a more complete story. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, have you ever heard the saying "too good to check"?
No.
It's like sort of a joking saying, like in journalism, but that, an anecdote or something is too good to check, because like the reality is life is messy, and the necessities of narrative are such that you have to sand off all those edges. And I think that's what I'm saying is the product flaw that needs to be addressed. I don't know if it's the semaphore and separating it out like opinion or whatnot, but I kind of think back to when Mike Arrington was running TechCrunch, and he used to call this like process journalism, and it sort of became a joke, but I think he was kind of getting at something that was very accurate, in that it is a process at getting to an approximation of the truth. And as such, it kind of needs almost to be presented that way, because again, like I go back to Andreessen's criticism, about masks or anything, that yes, I mean, things change. Like they call it the first draft of history, because you have, 6 hours to come up with some semblance of the truth. Maybe it's just packaging this as something a little bit different in a lot of ways. And I think that, again, I go back to like feature articles. I don't know, man, would I ever want someone to write a feature about me? I don't know. I could give them the names of like 10 people to contact who would say terrible things about me. I could do that very easily.
I do think that things emerge from conversations and from informal back and forths, and from maybe the assertions of people that are potentially not, trustworthy, and they become kind of validated through like this stuff. Okay, I didn't listen to the whole Andreessen Rogan podcast, but there were accusations from Mark Andreessen that basically Elizabeth Warren helms this kind of deep state apparatus that pursues the agenda of some kind of nefarious bureaucratic, weapon to like make life difficult for people that it doesn't like, for people that they don't like, or for
Okay.
their own agenda, right? Like, and it's not part of this notion of the deep state, which has gone from being a really fringe Trump idea to something that's like literally, I think, part of what is popularly in America understood to be a really big problem. That layers of bureaucracy and regulation and
Yeah,
people
we
that
hate
are motivated
bureaucracy.
by
Americans hate bureaucracy. It's just
but
rebranding
Americans
bureaucracy as
may
deep
hate
state.
bureaucracy,
It
but
makes it conspiratorial. We
right,
hate
but Brian,
bureaucracy.
trace the idea, right? Like this as a platform idea that becomes central to the whole, Department of Government Efficiency, to like everything that people are talking about unwinding, these unproductive forces in government. This is an idea that has now kind of moved through this system, and it's now the idea. It's now the idea that will be the sort of populist platform that will drive a wave of change in Washington that we haven't seen for decades.
And I think that's just the reality of living in a populist era, right? And I think in some ways it's inevitable that the news media, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, is going to get caught up in this populist era. Like I don't think that Kamala Harris could have won in this populist time, and it's just about adapting to it. And I don't know the best direction
But I think in the end, and maybe this is just a lame answer, but it's not either or, it's both. That people that talk about we are the media routinely, as you've said many times, reference sort of canonical sources of truth that do come from, reported sources. That Jim is absolutely right. The work of a good journalist is vitally important to how society functions, and we need it. And we need that kind of mechanism of sorting through fact from fiction. And, even when it sometimes gets it wrong, that it's vitally important to have that estate to keep power in check. And so I think he's right. And I think it was actually, he said something that needed to be said, that the notion that Twitter or that social media is going to help, kind of replace reporting is nonsense.
Right. The question ends up being, I think that's 100%. We are not going to disagree on that. The question ends up being how you pay for it, right? And so one of the things that you've been on about, I believe, is that all publishers need to get closer to the transactional layer, right? I mean, a lot of publishing business models they're intermediate pages in some ways. You know what I mean? Like they're a step between, and you see it most clearly, I believe, in these affiliate operations. This was the way to get to the transactional layer. Now, I think you can argue that the way it was executed was being a classic unnecessary intermediate page in many instances, right? And Google, which sets the rules of the road, has clearly agreed. They have, at least in my understanding, at least the people I've talked to, I mean, they've really devastated a lot of these affiliate operations at publishers that were critical to their business models. How do publishers, particularly news publishers, get to the transactional layer?
Well, I mean, I would just back up, and I guess my feeling right now, having seen Google make some what are called manual action decisions in the last few weeks that essentially wipe people off the face of the internet. These are not about,
They're
algorithmic
deplatforming.
changes. They're basically
Maybe publishers have to just
deplatforming.
adopt the language of the year and see like we're being
Right.
deplatformed.
But it just makes me, contextualize the challenge for media broadly. We've seen lots of layoffs this week at my alma mater and others, significant layoffs that reflect super challenging times for their business model. I think that the truth is what I would call impression-based media. That is stuff that serves an audience largely free of charge, where advertising sales organizations go out and sell access to that audience is under tremendous pressure, probably never going to come back. This isn't a kind of recessionary blip. That's selling, influence or, proximity or context to advertisers is a smaller and smaller business. Where it is vital is still in video, because that's the most persuasive environment to tell a story. And it's been, the making and selling of video at scale for a lot of publishers has been for sure an elusive, kind of difficult economic game. And so, yeah, if you're in the subscription business, you need a paying transactional relationship with lots of folks. Talk to anybody that's built a subscription business. It's hard to get that flywheel going at scale such that it pays for a materially sized newsroom and media organization. It's easier to do if you're a Substack author, but even super successful kind of emergent groups like Puck are still pretty small businesses. You need hundreds of thousands of subscriptions to pay for a big news team. And so, what's left and what else is there? And so when you divide up where the money comes from, it either comes from, impression-based advertising. Again, largely the best business there to be in is video. It comes from subscription relationships, and that's a coveted game that takes a long time and really only supports a big business at scale. And there's transactional revenue. And what is transactional revenue? Well, that's media sits between an audience and a validated transaction of some sort. That was the affiliate business. For many people, that made up 20 to 40% of their revenue in the media business. And in places where you were facilitating a service-based or high lifetime value transaction, like in your case, you're selling, somebody in, I don't know, ad tech shit that's worth a lot of money. Or
excuse me, not ad tech shit.
Publisher tech, MarTech shit. Okay. Or you're selling a life insurance policy, or you're selling a credit card, or you're selling home services, or you're selling a LLC registration, something that's high value, in the health category, you get a lot of that. That is a meaningful job boards even, right? Like a vertical publication in some space that owns the mechanism for finding good people could make a lot of money in job boards.
I hate job boards.
The point is
they never make as much money as people think. That's my theory about job boards.
Fair enough. But
I had a disastrous experience about building one.
We're trying to make the point now that publishers need a new revenue source. Those transaction streams are really important. I don't think your event business is going to float your publishing company. And Google doesn't love it. Google doesn't love this transaction layer that sits below between them, right? The navigator, the place where people start a journey, the ultimate influencer where you go, and the commercial entity, let's call it a bank. So that layer that exists, which was NerdWallet and Forbes and CNN and lots of other companies, Google's kind of being hostile to them right now. And they're doing it to clean up the SERP. They're doing it to make room for commercial entities in the SERP. They're doing it to push more paid. And it's a troubling time for publishers that, for good reason, are looking to diversify revenue sources. So that's.
But on left, nobody is out, and maybe it's in Miami. Nobody's out protesting this, and nobody is carrying around NerdWallet signs in South Beach. Well,
NerdWallet likely the beneficiary, by the way. But
okay, well, they buy a lot of ads, so go figure.
Well, the story that's missing here, the real story is that news brands, right, got into the business of affiliate to compete with the likes of NerdWallet, and Google thinks that mostly thinks that news brands should stick to news and shouldn't be in the business of facilitating transactions.
Well, okay, but a lot of these news brands,
why does Google
did not
even
have the
get to have an opinion?
They didn't have the expertise, so they outsourced it. And I can see, look, I guess one man's transactional layer is another person's, brand arbitrage, and that you're taking a brand that has authority in news and which has limited, as we've said, economic value in the market right now. Let's just be real.
You take a brand that has awareness and trust, and you put it to work.
You launder it. You take it to the laundromat, right? Take it to the SEO laundromat.
That's one way of looking at it, Brian. But what if someone invests millions and millions of dollars in content? What if someone rivals, a pure play like NerdWallet in creating content that helps a person make a decision? Like, who's Google to say that you shouldn't be in that business? You should be in that business if you deserve to be in that business.
Yeah, no, I heard this, and this is not just the U.S. market. I heard this last week in the U.K. I mean, they came for the coupons first. Next thing you know, they're coming for everything.
That's really dangerous when Google tells you what business you can be in. Very dangerous.
All right, let's put a pin in that, as they say. I want to move on to talk a little bit about how really the internet is sort of becoming real life, but I think around spectacle. And I don't know if this is something I'm trying to sort of form this is I think spectacle is back. And, a lot of this is, and look, I know people don't want politics and stuff, but like the MAGA stuff is so important because societies adapt. I mean, in the 80s, like Reaganism had its impact on culture and media, therefore, is downstream of culture. And I'm seeing a lot, like
I thought
really
it was
embedded
culture.
Okay, well, embedded within MAGA is spectacle. The Trump rallies, which were totemic in that world, are pure spectacle. I've never been to one, but everything I've seen, they're pure spectacle. The Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, that was complete spectacle. It drew like over 60 million viewers. That's amazing. Yeah, it broke like some technology. That's fine. You had Mike Tyson's bare ass becoming a meme immediately. The fight itself was nothing. I didn't even end up staying up for it. The undercard was pretty good though, I gotta say. And I was reminded kind of, did you get Al Capone's vault in Canada as a kid?
No.
Okay, well, this is actually right when Fox was founded. It was 1986. And Geraldo Rivera, who had just been fired from ABC for something, he went on some like syndicated, it was called WGSN. I think it was out of Chicago. And they did this, they found Al Capone's vault in some hotel in Chicago, and they were going to open it on live TV. And 30 million people, including me at like 12 years old, tuned into this live 2-hour special, and it was a complete spectacle. They opened the vault. There was nothing in there. Okay. But that doesn't matter. The spectacle was the point. And I think what we're seeing a return to spectacle. A couple of data points that you highlighted, actually, so I'm taking them from you. But one is these lookalike contests. I think there was a Timothy Chalamet lookalike contest in Washington Square Park in October that drew thousands, including Timothy Chalamet himself. I guess he won. Someone else actually won. But these have like spread. There's all these lookalike contests. And that to me is just like, it's spectacle. It's grassroots spectacle. And then you have this live streaming, right? And Kai Cenat is doing this subathon. I'm like getting way over my skis with this stuff. I don't even know. He's going to host a special Thanksgiving live stream with Kevin Hart, who I could do with less of, and Drewski. I've seen some of his videos. It's part of his Mafiathon 2, a 30-day continuous broadcast in which he's trying to become the most, I guess, subscribed YouTuber. Connect the dots here, Troy. What is going on? Do you see the spectacle as the connective tissue or something else? By the way, these things that Kai Cenat does, like he's been swatted multiple times during these things. Like this is not just sitting around.
One of the things I think about generational media consumption. Last night I said to my son got new glasses and he put them on to watch a movie, and I said, "Oh, those are pretty normcore." And he's like, "How do you know that word?" And I'm like, "What do you mean normcore?" Like, yeah, it's old. Yeah. I mean, Brian told it to me 5 years ago or something. It's like, he's like, you didn't, you got that off some, like, he accuses me of, picking up sort of cultural cues from random places on the internet. And what occurred to me with this Kai Cenat thing is how much of culture people don't even like see that is really for people that are tuned in is really, really important to kind of generational influence. Like this thing is like what was it called? The Mafiathon 2.
Yeah.
And, he's trying to get, I guess, Twitch subscribers. But like, let's just talk about the people that passed by this little talk show, right? Like Snoop was there and Kim Kardashian was there and Travis, Barker from Blink 182 was there and SZA was there. And I don't know, like Andre Iguodala was there and Lizzo and Benny Blanco. They all came by, right? In addition to Kevin Hart. Like these are, significant. I mean, in the context of sort of TV viewership, these are very significant, media moments that like people didn't even know about. Like this kid from New York that's doing a streaming marathon. And the insiders, the really savvy people, like continuously, like the Kardashians, know what's going on. Like Serena Williams drops by as part of some McDonald's collaboration on this live marathon. This is like, the numbers that Jerry Lewis did in the old days. Now, what I would say more broadly is what we missed with streaming, where much of our consumption shifted to kind of a library model where we took our shows off the shelf and we watched them. And we loved it when our, viewing patterns, intersected with our friends. And we say, what are you watching on Netflix and all of that, so we can find some common ground. Is that television at its best for me is like a warm fire. It's the live, it's the embrace of like, you called it spectacle, but it's the kind of live moment that we all share in is the moment of warmth. That's why I like the NFL. And that's why the NFL is so wildly popular.
It's
spectacle, but it's also, we're all watching it together. It's why we'll watch. That's why the rights for the Thanksgiving Day parade are worth, more than one would think, and they just came up for renewal. It's why we like these live things.
Right. I get that. What all I'm saying is there's not going to, the MASH final episode is not coming back as a live experience, et cetera. I don't necessarily, maybe occasionally like with Game of Thrones finale, but it's going to be very rare. But I think in order to create these live moments, you gotta have a spectacle, right? The Mike Tyson, Logan Paul, is it Jake Paul? Which one? Was it Logan? I don't even know. Logan Paul. That's not great boxing. I don't think. I'm not like a boxing expert, but I've watched a lot of boxing in my day. That's not great boxing. Watching a YouTuber take on like a 60-year-old Mike Tyson. It's not exactly it. So what was the appeal to it then?
The appeal was it was, a wonderful thing to talk about before it happened. It was about a lot of things. It was about someone regaining their glory. It was about aging. It was about an underdog. It was a great thing to talk about. Perfect. The buildup was perfect. The fight was terrible. The fight was ridiculous. But yeah.
But that's the thing. It's like the substance almost doesn't matter. The spectacle is what matters. And that's why I'm like, to me, it's sort of an extension of the hype era, right? Like, I mean, the products that are pushed a lot of times with, these hype beasts and whatnot aren't great or anything, but it's just the hype itself is the point.
What's funny about what you're saying? Yeah, part of what you're saying is really interesting because when that phenomenon moved to politics, it was really shocking and surprising for people that believe that space should be governed by decency and truth, right? Like you got this, like, you're right. It's spectacle, and a Trump rally looks more like a wrestling match than it does, sort of political event with decorum.
It's wild. So it's wild.
It's wild. Yeah. And in that environment, it's sort of like the broader thing that like narrative and humor and, sort of emotion become more important than truth or facts or, it's like entertainment wins, as Alex always says.
Yeah. And I think the packaging has to change in a lot of these things because the packaging is winning with spectacle, with, even like, there's a big debate going on within Democratic circles about Joe Rogan, right? And about whether the left needs its own Joe Rogan. or whether, Kamala made a massive mistake not going on Joe Rogan. Like, yeah, she did make a mistake, because guess what? It would have been a complete spectacle. Do it live. Like, that would have been a real spectacle. I don't think it changes the election. I just think we're in just a populist time, and she didn't have a prayer really, but that would have been like really good. How many people would have, watched that? I mean, if anything was going to be a quote unquote game changer, I think that could have, maybe been one. I don't think it was on offer, but I think it's an interesting point about where things are going. All right, I want to move on unless you have something else. One of the things is to keep on this is whether a MAGA aesthetic is forming. Did you see this Jaguar ad that's like, ad controversies they feel quaint, and I'm a little nostalgic for them. A good rebrand. I used to write.
What's the big one? What was the big one in the old days? An ad controversy.
An ad controversy?
Can you think of one? Yeah, like of old.
It just come and go, really. Anytime a logo is changed, I don't know if Alex must have been. Did Alex change the Airbnb logo where they said it looked like a vagina?
I don't know if that was a vagina. Is it a vagina?
That was the controversy.
I know. It still does.
What was he supposed to say?
I don't know if that was his work. I hope it was.
I don't want to bring it up with him. It's probably he can be sensitive. So can you?
Definitely. Anyway, so your point is that Jaguar does this stuff.
So Jaguar does this, so they're, I guess, unveiling Jaguar is like a rounding error of an automotive brand, particularly in the US. Like, it's just like, I don't know what, I think it
not in car culture, but in sales. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So in reality, so they're unveiling a new rebranding at Art Basel. Okay, so clearly where they're aiming this is not for the sort of the MAGA crowd for certain.
You know what they call this aesthetic? This aesthetic is exuberant modernism.
Exuberant modernism.
Yes.
It looks like a fashion thing. Like, I sent it to Anna.
Did you like it? Did it appeal to? What did Anna think? I want to hear what Anna thought.
I mean, she wrote about it, Sociology of Business, check it out, and wrote about it from the angle of, you're basically taking something that I looked at it, I'm like, this is like typical fashion stuff. It's not for everyone. It's like you look at the fashion shows, the haute couture and stuff, and it's like, yeah, when you take that out of that context and bring it into like an X post or something, it's obviously like ludicrous,
Brian,
right?
I thought if anything would offend you, it would have been they should have gone to copywriting jail, because they said things like live vivid, create exuberant, delete ordinary. Delete ordinary. I love that. Break molds. Stop it. Copy nothing. Like, you should be offended just by those word
yeah,
pairings.
okay, that's fine. But like, okay, it's like fashion. Like, I mean, the stuff is like not to be taken either literally or seriously in my book. I mean, maybe that's me wearing a cream t-shirt, but I think when you take it into like automotive, and for some reason it really struck, I think everything gets pulled into this like political cultural fight. It really struck a chord, I've noticed, on X in particular, right? And it got pulled into all the boogeyman of DEI, woke culture, everything got thrown into the mix. And then it was compared, I think there was just a coincidence that Volvo had a very traditional, heartwarming ad, pro-natalist, because it was about basically following the story of a journey of a family from learning that they're going to have a child to that child growing up. And I wonder whether, advertising is going to be under pressure to change its, because like advertising is, if you look at all the elite, in quotes, institutions under pressure, advertising is going to be one of them. Nobody believes that advertising agencies reflect like what exists in the overall US electorate and citizenry. They do not. Okay. I remember signing a story after Trump's election in 2016 about what it was like to be a Republican in an ad agency. It was a little bit of a controversial assignment. I had to go through a bunch of different reporters before someone would actually report it, which kind of says something. But basically, it was this. It was like, they're not filled with any of, the sort of people. It's not reflective of the overall society, obviously. I can remember sitting in a New York ad agency. They were batting around ideas. It was for one of those like agency of the year corny profiles I had to write. And it was a bunch of like 20 something year olds from Williamsburg who were trying to understand what Walmart moms wanted. The whole thing struck me as ludicrous. But of course, the narrative was such that I couldn't use that to make fun of the agency because
I mean, listen,
giving them an award to get like congratulatory ads in Adweek.
I mean, this was almost like it was created as a sort of like something for the new power kind of center to be angry about. I mean, this kind of gender fluid reinterpretation, discarding the heritage of a classic kind of almost like, well, this classic English car brand, that was kind of defined underneath of it all. This a kind of, in some ways, very sexist kind of like hot woman, sexy British gentleman car owner, like just to kind of juxtapose the two of those. And then at the same time, not even show the car. I mean, this was designed for controversy in some ways, or someone's just sort of like extremely bad timing.
Yeah. But what's interesting to me is like you move from one censorious era and you just seamlessly move into a new censorious era. So before like language was being policed and all of these, you had to use these new words. Like I remember when I was editing in 2020, all of a sudden things were being centered on. And so I'm like, what does this mean? I was like, can't we just use the words we've used before? And that obviously, it quote unquote triggered a lot of people. A lot of the psychotherapy babble became very common. And now in this new era, we've got new censors about it's like, oh no, you have to do this, that, and you can't have conceptual ads. I saw Tucker Carlson is on about, he's apparently an architectural critic now. He's very against brutalism and what he calls postmodernism. I'm not sure if it is postmodernism, basically modernism. And, he wants to go back to, and I've seen this a lot, to classical architecture. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this carnival of the sort of MAGA manifests itself and puts pressure on a lot of cultural industries, because I believe it is going to happen. I believe it will. And advertising is one of them.
No, well, I don't know. MAGA will never take culture from the liberals. Never.
No, it'll develop its own parallel
That would be like
sure.
kicking the liberals out of the high school, production. It's never going to happen.
Okay.
But our aesthetic will be defined, will be influenced definitely by. Listen, America's a pendulum culture, right? It always swings back and forth. That's what it does. But yeah, it was funny. I don't know how in the notes you connected this to Sydney Sweeney getting like buff, but you had.
Well, I'm trying to work through. I wasn't going to reveal that. I'm trying to look, a lot of people fled from X. They've gone over to Blue Sky. I refuse to do that stuff. I am very comfortable in trying to understand this different world of the, bro culture, whatever you want to call it, manosphere. And I think X is an important element of that. I don't think it is going to replace anything, but I do think that it is an important element. I think the fact that Elon Musk went to buy a X versus doing a Jeff Bezos and buying like the Washington Post, I think that's actually, obviously the prices were far different. I think that's actually, if your goal is to exert political influence, I think that's what are
you saying about Sydney Sweeney getting buff, Brian, and about the banana on the wall?
So Sydney Sweeney is basically, she's like nonsense. I never even knew this person, but she's like all over like X and this like MAGA culture. I think you saw this during the Logan Paul Mike Tyson fight. Like, I do think that they have
pro boobs.
it's a pro boob culture. I don't know what else to say. Like it is. And I don't know if that's a sign of, we're going to enter into, the next 4 years, or at least the next 18 months are going to be defined a lot by this political force that has come in. I just see it. Now, the banana was the $6.2 million banana that was taped to a wall. It got bought at auction for $6.2 million. To me, this is also a spectacle. Some crypto guy bought it. But the spectacle of the banana art was, to me, it's a little bit of an exception because...
no, it's a good example. I'll give that one to you. I still am struggling with... I know I like the sort of, your thought about the kind of Republican aesthetic being kind of big boobs. I think it's a good idea. Also, zins. Well, no, you put zin in the same sentence. What's up with zins?
I think zins are part of the MAGA aesthetic. I mean, did you listen to like Andreessen? He must. Is he popping like nonstop like zins?
Was he zinning?
The guy was hyped. I find him hard to understand. Like I need to people listen to podcasts on like 2x. I need to listen to 1.5.
Yeah, that's always
like he speaks really fast. And fast talker is not exactly synonymous with trustworthy, but leave that aside.
Okay, so we'll be returning to this idea in future podcasts. I like it. It's good.
Okay, should we get into Thanksgiving good product?
We could, but maybe we just drive by this the browser war thing quickly. We won't take a lot of time on it, but
okay, browser wars.
Well,
OpenAI is supposedly building its own browser. We discussed last week how the DOJ wants Google to split off its browser. We've had a debate about whether a standalone browser is like. I like how Alex is like, yeah, it's not like an attractive business. It's like a $60 billion business. But
Alex made the point, and I'll give Alex a little shout out because he wanted to send in his monologue. He said, we can't figure out, it's inconceivable to think about, Google without Chrome, but, we aspire to build an artificial brain and put people on Mars and do all the things that tech companies aspire to do that are, miraculous. And he's like, but we can't figure out how to do things that they don't want to do, like prevent kids from getting on Instagram and split out the browser company and the search engine. So that's Alex's rant on that, which is fine. And but no, it's cool. Listen, the market's going to sort out browsers. Okay, Google is inseparable from Chrome. Benedict Evans made the point, Brian, that what would happen if you didn't allow Chrome to be on Android devices? Well, is it really about Chrome anymore? It's all about AI. Do you prevent anybody from using the sort of Google AI API inside of Android? Like, how would this actually work? Who would buy Chrome? What would the business model be? There's just like a lot of questions. In the meantime, this week, again, reporting back from, family life, my son says, oh, I just put ChatGPT on my front screen of my phone. He's like, I'll never use Google again. And he's like, I use it for everything.
Does he say search it up?
No, he doesn't say. We joke about that, actually.
My nephews say search it up. They don't say Google.
This was kind of a Canadian thing, search it up. But the fact is that browsers just put a utility or a piece of functionality closer to the consumer, so you don't have to actually type in a URL. They're already doing it on your phone with OpenAI, with ChatGPT app, and on the app on your desktop. The browser is about to be reinvented, it or not, DOJ.
Well, this is a classic. To me, it's the old, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And this is Microsoft versus the DOJ 2.0, probably, right? The market they're going after Google's ad tech dominance, and they're going after, its search dominance. I think the market is going to end up solving for both of those things. Then the government's role in it is just going to be tying up Google in a lot of litigation, but that the market ultimately, and I believe that's what we should want, is the market should be the arbiter. I think the government can just be and as far as the different questions, I know Benedict Evans loves to ask questions about lots of different things. Guess what? Trump got elected saying he was going to like deport these millions of people. And how exactly? You can ask like a litany of questions in which there was no answers. Yet we barreled forward. And so, yeah, there's not a lot of answers to those questions. But JD Vance said, how do you eat a big sandwich? One bite at a time. And so, yeah, I kind of go with Alex. Like disruption happens from a lot of different directions. And I see that the tech industry thinks they love to be the disruptors, not to disrupt it. And they're one power center in society. They're a growing power center, but guess what? There's other power centers, and the government is still a power center. I can't wait to see this Doge thing because they're going to start to realize that just because you're in tech doesn't mean that everything like revolves around you in society. That's just reality.
Well, what will be interesting, just to get a little more kind of specific about the browser thing, is every navigational system needs a toll booth. You got to have a toll booth because you need economic structures to guide the trade-offs that happen beneath the navigational system. You need those paid links or whatever it is that's going to guide commercial behavior. And we don't know what that's going to look like yet. And it's a big, big, big question for the marketplace. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. But I'm not really, I don't know, like at a time we're trying to figure out like getting to Mars and all this stuff like this. I don't know, figuring out where to put the toll booth and stuff. It doesn't seem like it's that like, I don't know. Is it that hard? I'm sure they'll figure it out.
We'll get to it. All right. Back to a good product. Good product. You know, Thanksgiving is a much bigger thing in this country than it ever was when I was growing up. You know, Canadian Thanksgiving, as you know, comes earlier because the weather gets colder earlier. It wasn't like, a week of festivities. It was just like Thanksgiving. We get the Monday off. We have a turkey. It's not the same.
Okay, so you're not into Thanksgiving.
No, I'm into it. I'm into it, and people love it. I mean, this is the number one holiday in America, right? People love it.
I think it is. It isn't as tainted as Christmas. You have the Christmas thing, and not everyone. It's religious. It's not civic, at least in its roots. I think Thanksgiving is. It's.
I mean, the MVP of Thanksgiving is the stuffing, right? It's got to be the stuffing.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's two modes of stuffing. Stuffing that comes out of the bird, which is moister and maybe more flavorful and oily from the turkey. And there's stuffing, the overflow stuffing that gets baked in the oven, which ends up having nice crispy edges and stuff. Both of which need to be smothered in gravy, in my opinion, and not bullshit gravy, like gravy that's made from real drippings.
Yeah,
like
giblets should be in there.
No, it's just like my grandma made good, like when people just like starch the shit out of the gravy and it's just sort of like some gooey brown liquid. No, you need, it's got to be drippings. And don't put
pumpkin pie or
don't put
pie?
don't put cranberries on everything.
Cranberries is the most divisive part of the Thanksgiving.
I mean, cranberries are fine, but don't mix them in with your stuffing and your gravy. That's stupid.
I think cranberries are weird. There's a reason it's never served like the other 364 days of the year.
Really? That's a good point. On the pumpkin versus apple, pumpkin has its moments, but nobody likes pumpkin pie better than apple pie. Nobody.
It's another one that's not served 364 days of the year.
No, but seriously, when faced with a choice between pumpkin pie and apple pie, what do you pick? Apple pie every time.
I face this. I'm driving across Alligator Alley to spend Thanksgiving and Pelican Preserve. If anyone wants to meet up at Flip Flops, which is the resort-like pool at the Pelican Preserve retirement community, 55 and better community.
You got is there a tennis court or a pickleball?
Yeah, they got pickleball. It's great. I know a lot of people give grief to retirement communities, I guess. I don't know why, but they're amazing. Like there's lots to do. Everyone drives around in golf carts and there's a golf course. There's obviously a preserve. There's some alligators who live there. Go around, peep the alligators. They just had baby alligators not long ago. So see how they're doing. There's a bandstand. But yeah, there's Flip Flops. And Flip Flops is the bar at the resort pool.
Is it staffed or is it just community?
It's pretty rambunctious. It gets pretty rambunctious. Happy hour does start at 3 because everyone goes to bed early.
Did they play cards or dominoes or something?
Yeah. You got to move back. You got to move the happy hour back a little bit. If you're getting into bed at 8:30, you got to start the happy hour.
Well, Brian, I'm that, and I'm now excited about the very exclusive PVA holiday party that we've now.
Yeah, I wanted to call it, you've rebranded it. I wanted to do the holiday extravaganza, but it's fine. It's fine. Tell us so we're having this at an unopened hot restaurant. Joe Marchese always knows all the hot places. He's a tequila entrepreneur.
It's kind of a guy that he knows. I know him too. His name's John McDonald. He has Mercer Hospitality Group. And they own very, very lovely and reliable restaurant in Soho called the Lure Fish Bar that I go to sometimes, as well as a number of other places like
that's an old school.
Like you ever been to the Bowery Meat Company? That's theirs.
No.
Nice room. I was there this week with Seb. Yeah, so they're converting another restaurant of theirs. It's going to be called Bar Mercer, and we're going to be the sort of inaugural guests. We're going to rent out the room, and the chef is going to make I guess the lunch menu or elements of it, and it's going to be great. It's not open to the
great.
It's just it's who's coming. I guess just a
can I sell tickets?
People.
Can I sell?
No, but you could get a sponsorship, Brian.
Anyone who wants to sponsor the PVA holiday extravaganza, get in touch. Can I do?
We are going to get.
Can I do a sponsor? Can I do a sponsor activation?
You want to do a sponsor call out? Yeah. Well, IMC,
we are going to have some programming, some light programming. So I want to try this thing of I'm trying, just like I'm on my way to reinventing the webinar, I want to reinvent the panel, right? And I want to make it more like a live stream where you have like a group discussion. It's very participatory. I did this new growth agenda that I did the other week. You didn't come to it. It's weird. But it's basically like, it's a rolling conversation where people are participants. You call people up. It's like kind of like casual. It moves very quickly. I think I might be onto something. So we'll see how it goes. But that's
you're going to host and you're going to facilitate, and you'll do a little bit of prep work with folks. Like you'll ask people.
Yeah. So what I do is I ask everyone to submit 3 topics that they want to discuss, and then I just say, hey, I'm going to call you up to discuss this. Be prepared. Good. And then while it goes, the frisky people present themselves in the audience. They decide they want to get involved. And then, so it's less like regimented and it's more, I think I don't know if there'll be anyone, hopefully it won't be swatted, but hopefully it can take a few cues of what's working with these Twitch streamers and reinvent the dreadful panel situation at conferences. I hate panels. I hate panel prep calls.
Maybe we can take some of what we learned from this and bring it back here.
Yeah.
Like what questions are you going to be asking people? Do you know?
Yeah, it's going to go based off of what their topics are. Like I did this.
They're going to submit them to you.
Yeah. I'm going to ask everyone who to submit topics. I did this for a few events recently. It works really well because otherwise, like, first of all, how arrogant would it be of me to be like, oh, I know everything that we're getting tons of great CEOs. They know what's most important to discuss going in. I mean, yeah, you give them some guidance or whatnot, but to me, that's where a lot of events need to go. I don't know. I don't like a lot of industry events, but that's me.
That's it for this episode of People versus Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People versus Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week. All right. We'll leave it there. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's fun
you too,
today.
Troy.
Thanks, Brian.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.